Vladimir Putin in China is saying exactly what he wants people in Paris to hear. Russia has never objected to Ukraine's membership in the European Union, but as for NATO, it's a categorical no. Putin, at a meeting with Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, said Russia has never opposed Ukraine's European Union membership. But NATO is a different matter. Our position is well known. It's unacceptable for us, says Putin. Why say this now? It's simple. Because on September 4th, a coalition of more than 30 countries is gathering in Paris to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine and the outlines of a European military mission on Ukrainian territory. Moscow is trying to look reasonable, like, well, the European Union is about the economy, let Ukraine join the European Union but not NATO. What do you mean? That's a red line. Look, we're making a concession by offering Ukraine the European Union. Such a lordly but honestly dirty gesture, but of course this reasonableness has a tail and it's sticking out. From the news reports over the past few weeks, refusing NATO is just part of the Kremlin's package. Where there is, give us Donbas, no Western troops on the territory of Ukraine, and complete total neutrality for our country. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is September 3rd on the calendar. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we begin, I want to emphasize to you that on this YouTube channel there are 5 fresh news and analytical segments every day. So you stay informed about all events. So be sure to subscribe to this channel and like this episode. Now, let's put it all together. Reuters writes that after talks with Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi, Putin stated that NATO expansion should be addressed for peace in Ukraine. One more note. The Kremlin views European proposals for security guarantees for Ukraine negatively and will not accept the presence of NATO forces on Ukrainian territory. And the third one is the very framework of the deal that's been coming up for several days now. Well, let's say definitely more than a week. Renouncing NATO, surrendering Donbas neutrality, and removing Western instructors and troops. So basically, Putin is kind of sending a message to Europe that, like, he allows Ukraine to join the European Union, but not NATO, and that joining the European Union is acceptable. This is just a soft wrapper for a rather old ultimatum, just with a new recipient. This is being said not to Washington, but to Paris, Berlin, and the other Europeans who have drafts of that very military mission in Ukraine in their hands. What are they talking about? Strengthening air defense with the help of European and American troops, training the armed forces of Ukraine by European instructors on Ukrainian territory, equipment repair, logistics. Also on the territory of Ukraine, accordingly, European troops are coming in for this as well. American recon and surveillance. A possible no-fly zone could allow civilian aviation, at least in western Ukraine at first. What should we do about these statements from Putin? Well, first of all, don't take these statements as a step toward peace. There is no step toward peace here. This isn't about peace. It's about trying to break the link between the European Union and NATO, leaving Ukraine with so-called market integration into Europe without military guarantees. And time for the war to return. And secondly, these statements by Putin need to be used. If Moscow says the European Union doesn't concern us, let Ukraine join. That means for Paris, for Brussels. Well, it's easier to explain within Europe that, say, Ukraine's economic and infrastructural integration is part of peace and not so-called escalation. It's really easier to convey this to the European community. And then these phrases fit under that. It doesn't bother Moscow. You can push through decisions on energy integration, railways, digital services, customs, and most importantly, on the internal mission of the European Union on the territory of Ukraine. So, in a way, as crazy as it may sound, this actually makes it a bit easier for Europeans to explain to European society why all of this needs to be done. Let me say again, as odd as it sounds. Now, the contexts. Reuters is also covering the Putin-Fico meeting. Putin adds that the warnings from European leaders about future Russian aggression are hysteria and scare stories. To this, the new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte responds with a generalization that is very important for us to hear on air. As he states, distance no longer equals safety. We are all at risk. This refers to Mark Rutte's statement where he said that a Russian missile could reach The Hague in 5 and 10 minutes somewhere far away, and the war doesn't concern us at all. By the way, I talked about how Europe is preparing for war in the previous episode on this same YouTube channel. So go check it out if you missed Guardian. Here's today's news from Beijing. Putin praises China ties and calls Xi Jinping his dear friend. And Kyiv and the European Union remind that Russia has no veto right over Ukraine's membership in NATO. And here's another piece from Reuters. It's quite fundamental to this whole story. No future settlement can be built on Ukraine giving up its decisive rights. No one will give Moscow a veto over Ukraine's accession to NATO. Once again, this is the opposition quoted daily. What are the consequences for Kyiv here? This phrase from Putin, European Union is allowed, NATO is not, should work like a battering ram. In favor of the rapid implementation of European systems on the ground in Ukraine, I mean the actual deployment of troops, the real placement of instructors, the actual transfer of production and so on. If, listen, they don't object, well, as Putin says, they don't object, yes, great, well, we merge the energy systems of Europe and Ukraine, bring air defense service bases to the territory of Ukraine, set up repair docks for armored vehicles, bring in instructors on a permanent basis, deploy radars and electronic warfare, set up systematic information technology hubs for the military-industrial complex, and so on. Well, listen, this is European integration. Well, really, in such military boots, which makes NATO is not allowed because of Putin, just a ritual phrase without any real power. Here, you need to understand that, well, in fact, NATO isn't really inviting us anytime soon. But right now, Europe is trying to make sure that, yes, Ukraine does not join NATO. But Ukraine is essentially heavily arming itself and joining Europe's military structure. This is a convenient political moment for Paris. It's easier to explain to the French voter when even Putin publicly says that the European Union is not a problem for him at all. For those right-wing Putin supporters in France, it's simple. Even Putin doesn't oppose it. So why are you against Ukraine joining the European Union? The only question is scale, which concerns budgets and people. Plus, in general, this statement by Putin about not objecting to Ukraine joining the European Union, I think, is influenced by the meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska. Because you remember that after the meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska, Trump called Viktor Orban and he asked him, why on earth are you blocking Ukraine's entry into the European Union? Like, cancel it, stop it, Viktor Orban, there should be no blocking of Ukraine's entry into the European Union. This was right after Trump and Putin spoke. And finally, why does the Kremlin want these statements from Putin? Well, the answer is simple. Moscow is trying to play on the difference in tone between the United States and Europe, especially amid rumors of Trump's withdrawal from the negotiations. Putin's speech in Beijing is an invitation to Paris. Like, let's pretend that we're being constructive, but only NATO, the NATO issue, will put it off forever. Our task is not to get caught. And the best way to fill this phrase, Ukraine's accession to the European Union, as Putin puts it, with specifics, is to make the return of war technically more difficult and politically more costly. This phrase, NATO is not allowed, will just be a cover, but in reality we may never actually join NATO. But with the security guarantees being developed by Europe and our accession to the European Union, we can create that very security architecture, which will be no worse than NATO membership. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. Let me remind you, on this channel there are 5 fresh news and analytical stories every day, so you can stay up to date with all the latest news. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye.